Bayo didn't just find a wife by the river. He found his fortune, a new adventure, and a story that would make his grandchildren laugh. But little did he know, this river had a way of surprising even the most confident man. It was a hot afternoon when Bayo first saw her. The sun hung low over the river, casting long shadows over the water's surface. The village of Iwo was far from the city, nestled deep in the hills, where the trees seemed to breathe and the earth whispered old secrets. The river that ran through it was a lifeline, both to the people and the spirits. Bayo had heard the stories, of course. The elders would tell tales by the fire, warning the youth of the spirits that lived beneath the water. They spoke of brides, beautiful mysterious women who would rise from the river when the moon was full, offering themselves to men in exchange for something that could never be returned. Some called them spirits, others said they were the daughters of the river gods. But all agreed, no man who took a bride from the river ever lived a peaceful life afterward. Still, Bayo was a man of ambition, and his heart was hungry. He had nothing but his hands, calloused from labor, and a dream of building a legacy. The village elders told him he would never prosper without a wife, and so, with little more than a humble prayer and a bag of provisions, Bayo set off for the river that evening, hoping to find the woman who would change his fate. The sky darkened as he approached the water's edge. A cold breeze blew across his face, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar, something fragrant. He felt a shiver run down his spine, but dismissed it as nothing more than the evening chill. And then he saw her. She stood just beyond the water, where the river split into two narrow channels. Her skin was as dark as the night, shimmering faintly in the light of the setting sun. Her hair was long and tangled, cascading like a waterfall down her back. Her eyes, oh, her eyes, glowed like fireflies, a piercing unnatural gold that seemed to pull him in. She did not speak, but Bayo heard her voice in his mind, soft and sweet. "Come closer, Bayo. I have been waiting for you." Bayo's heart raced. He knew he should turn back, that this was wrong. The elders' warnings rang in his ears, but something in him, something deep and primal, urged him forward. He stepped into the river, the cold water rushing over his feet, the current pulling at his ankles as if it knew what he was about to do. As he neared her, she extended a hand, her fingers long and slender, and he took it without hesitation. "You are the one I have chosen," she said, her voice as smooth as the water itself. "I am your bride, Bayo. I will make you a man of wealth and power. All I ask in return is your devotion." The words seemed to settle deep within him, a promise of a life he had always dreamed of but could never have on his own. Power, wealth, the respect of his people, all within his grasp. Bayo nodded, his thoughts clouded by the feeling of her touch. His chest swelled with excitement. He didn't ask where she came from or why she had chosen him. All he knew was that he had never felt so certain, so alive. The river began to rise, the current growing stronger, as if it too was in anticipation of the bargain being made. He could feel the water tugging at his feet, pulling him deeper into its embrace. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the water calmed. The river was still, and the woman before him was gone, vanished into the mist that had begun to rise from the water. For a moment, Bayo stood alone at the river's edge, the cool air settling over him like a blanket. He looked down at his hand, still tingling from her touch, and felt a strange sense of loss. It was as if something important had been taken from him, but he couldn't place what. When he returned to the village, the people stared at him in awe. His clothes were soaked from the river, but he walked with a new confidence, as if the very earth beneath his feet had changed. He had done it. He had found his bride. That night, when he lay in his hut, he heard the sound of footsteps outside. It was her standing at the door. She was no longer a vision from the river but a woman, flesh and blood. Her beauty was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Her skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the hut, and when she spoke, her voice was like music. "I am yours now, Bayo," she whispered, and Bayo knew that she meant it. For the first time in his life, Bayo felt like he had everything he had ever wanted. The future was wide open before him. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, the woman in his bed, and the river's whisper in his dreams. But little did Bayo know, this was only the beginning. The river had given him more than just a bride. It had given him a path, one that would lead him through unexpected challenges, laughter, and triumphs. And every step of the way, he would remember the bargain he made and the promise he kept. Bayo awoke to the sound of laughter. It was early, the sky still a faint shade of blue, and the village was beginning to stir. He lay in bed, his new bride beside him, but the laughter was coming from outside, loud, merry, and unmistakably full of life. He sat up and glanced at his wife, whose presence still held an air of mystery and enchantment. Her beauty was undeniable, and every time he looked at her, he felt as though the river itself was running through his veins. There was an energy about her that was both soothing and electrifying. "What is that noise?" Bayo asked, rubbing his eyes. "It's too early for the village to be so cheerful." His bride smiled, a smile that seemed to hold secrets in its depths. "You'll find out soon enough," she said, her voice as musical as ever. "The river always tests those who claim it as their own. And you, Bayo, are no different." Bayo stood, excitement bubbling within him. He had made the bargain, he had taken the river's bride, and now he was ready for whatever lay ahead. Nothing could scare him now. He quickly dressed and stepped outside, blinking in the bright sunlight. The village had gathered in a large circle near the riverbank, and in the center of the crowd stood a large wooden chest. Children ran in circles, laughing, and the elders sat on stools, watching the proceedings with a quiet seriousness. "Ah, Bayo!" shouted his best friend Adebayo, waving him over. "You've returned, and just in time. They say your bride comes with a challenge." Bayo frowned. "A challenge?" he asked. He had heard stories, of course, about how the river sometimes demanded something in return for its gifts, but he wasn't sure what to expect. Adebayo, who had grown up hearing the tales, grinned. "It's a test of character. Every man who takes the river's bride has to face the first challenge within 3 days of marrying her. It's said that if you pass, the river will bless you with riches beyond imagination. But fail, and you'll be cursed." Bayo chuckled, his confidence undeterred. "Cursed, eh? I'm no fool. I'll take whatever it throws at me. What's the test?" The elder, a wise woman named Mama Olyamide, stood up from her seat and motioned for Bayo to approach. She was tall and bent with age, her face wrinkled but sharp with wisdom. She looked at him with a piercing gaze and spoke in a low, measured voice. "Bayo, the river has chosen you," she said. "But it is not without reason. The first challenge is one of courage. You must cross the river on foot." The crowd gasped. Crossing the river was not something to take lightly. The currents here were swift, and many who had tried had been swept away, never to be seen again. "But," Mama Olyamide continued, "you will not cross alone. Your bride will guide you. Only together will you reach the other side." The tension in the air grew palpable. Bayo felt his heart race. He had crossed the river many times before, though never on foot, and certainly not with the force of the current working against him. But he was a proud man. He had never backed down from a challenge, and this was no different. "Are you ready?" Mama Olyamide asked, her voice grave. Bayo nodded without hesitation. "I am ready." His bride joined him, her presence calming yet powerful. She took his hand in hers, her grip firm, and together they walked toward the riverbank. The crowd parted to let them through, and Bayo's heart thudded in his chest. The river stretched before him, its surface a glistening sheet of blue and silver. As they waded into the water, the current tugged at Bayo's legs. It was stronger than he had expected. The water surged around him, splashing against his chest, but his bride remained calm, moving gracefully beside him. He watched her, awestruck by the ease with which she navigated the water. It was as if the river itself was bending to her will. The deeper they went, the stronger the current became, until the water reached his waist. Bayo struggled to keep his footing, his legs growing tired from the force of the river. He glanced at his bride, whose expression remained unchanged. She looked ahead, as though she could see something that Bayo could not. "The river tests you, Bayo," she said softly. "It tests your patience, your strength, and your will. But remember, the river is never against you. It is simply showing you the way." Bayo nodded, trying to steady himself. The water was cold, and the current was growing stronger by the second. His feet slipped in the mud, and he found himself struggling to keep his balance. "Stay close to me," his bride instructed, pulling him along as she moved effortlessly through the water. They continued to wade deeper, the water now up to their chests, the current growing fiercer. The river seemed to pulse with energy, as though it had a life of its own. Bayo felt a surge of fear, but he pushed it aside. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the other side. The water here was calmer, and Bayo stood on solid ground once again, his breath coming in heavy gasps. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Bayo's heart was still racing. He had passed the challenge, but the river had left its mark on him. He had never felt so alive, and so connected to something greater than himself. His bride smiled at him, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You have done it, Bayo. The river has accepted you." And for the first time Bayo understood. The river was not just a force of nature. It was a part of him now, a part of his journey, and a part of the life he was building with his bride. By the next morning, word had spread across not just Iwo village, but to the surrounding towns. Bayo crossed the river and lived to tell the tale. People came walking in long lines with baskets, drums, and curious eyes. Some had heard whispers that Bayo's bride was not just a woman but a living blessing. Others were sure this was the start of a great destiny. But all of them came with the same question on their lips. What will happen next? Bayo stepped out of his hut that morning with a wide grin on his face. The village was alive with celebration. Drummers were already beating rhythms in the square. Young girls twirled in circles with colorful cloths in their hands. And the smell of roasted maize and spiced fish filled the air. He looked around and saw Bayo waving wildly, balancing a gourd of palm wine on his head like a circus act. "Brother Bayo, you've done it. You're the man of the year," he shouted. "Your name is already dancing in the mouths of griots." Bayo laughed and made his way through the crowd. He felt lighter, more at home than he ever had. And yet, he knew deep down, this was still only the beginning. At the center of the square, Mama Alyamide raised her staff high and called for silence. "Today the river has honored us. But the river gives, and the river teaches. There is a reason for every blessing." The crowd murmured in agreement. She turned to Bayo's bride, whose name they now learned was Zinariya, meaning golden thread in a forgotten tongue. Zinariya stepped forward gracefully, every movement like a dance. "My husband has passed the river's test," she said, her voice sweet and commanding. "And now the land must welcome what the river has delivered." Just then the sky darkened, not with storm clouds but with silver mist. The air thickened with warmth, and a soft drizzle began to fall. Not cold rain, but warm, fragrant droplets that smelled like citrus and honey. The ground shimmered as the water touched it, and wherever it landed, green things sprouted. Fresh herbs, tiny wildflowers, even sugarcane. The villagers gasped. The children laughed and ran barefoot through the mist, catching droplets on their tongues. Chickens began to cluck and flap excitedly as a small pool formed in the village square, clear, sparkling, and glowing faintly. "It's a rain of bounty," shouted Mama Alyamide. Zinariya turned to Bayo. "You asked for a legacy. This is only the beginning." And it was true. In just a few hours, the villagers had more crops than they'd planted. The cassava roots had doubled in size. The fishers found their baskets filled even before they reached the water. Even goats that hadn't eaten for days suddenly looked plump and cheerful. The feast began before sunset. Fires blazed, pots bubbled with soups and stews, and dancers twirled until their feet were sore. But amid the celebration, Bayo noticed something curious. Zinariya never ate. She moved among the people, smiling, laughing, blessing the children and whispering old riddles to the elders, but not once did she take a bite. Instead, she held a small silver bowl filled with river water, which she sipped occasionally. "You're not eating?" Bayo asked her gently. She smiled. "I eat differently, my love. I drink memory. I dine on promise. The food of your world is for your people. I have tasted rivers wider than this village and suns brighter than noon. But your yam porridge smells lovely." He laughed. "Well, don't be surprised if I ask you to teach me your recipes." As night fell and the stars came out in full celebration of their own, Zinariya stood beside Bayo, holding his hand tightly. "I will give you sons," she said. "Sons who will carry your name across the earth. But you must remember something important. A gift from the river must be shared. You cannot lock it away." Bayo nodded, though he didn't fully understand. Later that night, as they lay under the stars outside their hut, with soft music playing in the distance, Bayo whispered, "I never imagined my life would be like this." Zinariya replied, "It's not imagination, my dear husband. It's the result of courage, kindness, and knowing how to listen to things others ignore, like water, wind, and the silence between drums." Bayo didn't know what to say. So he simply held her hand and listened to the river in the distance, its song now part of his life forever. And yet, in the far distance beyond the hills, something else was stirring. Not every village believed in blessings without price. And not everyone was happy to see Iwo become so rich overnight. A week after the reign of bounty, Iwo village was the brightest spot in the region. Traders from neighboring towns flooded in, marveling at the sudden wealth. Baskets overflowed with crops, children wore new wrappers, and even the dogs seemed to bark with more joy. Bayo had become a village hero, and Zinariya, his radiant river bride, was adored by all. Songs were composed in her honor, with verses that compared her to moonlight on water and the laughter of rain on palm leaves. But not far away, across 7 hills and an old dusty road, sat Okunla, a village ruled by the proud and powerful chief Ogundil. Ogundil was a man who hated surprises, especially ones that made other villages outshine his. When his messengers brought news of Iwo's sudden fortune, Ogundil's eyes narrowed like a crocodile in the weeds. "Bayo," he growled. "The boy who used to come here to beg for palm kernels." "Yes, Kabiyesi," the messenger replied. "He returned with a bride from the river, and now, the land obeys them." Ogundil rose from his stool, his red cap nearly falling off. "Summon the drum spirits," he commanded. "Let the forest gods know we will not be outdone." That night, the great leather drums of Okunla echoed across the hills. No ordinary drumming. These were talking drums, the kind said to wake sleeping spirits and make trees shiver. Back in Iwo, Zinariya sat up suddenly in her sleep. Bayo stirred beside her. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were distant, like they were staring through the walls. "The drums from Okunla are speaking," she said softly. "They are calling on old powers. Ones not meant for this age." Bayo sat up too. "Is it danger?" Zinariya nodded. "Only if we forget who we are. Come, we must go to the river." They slipped outside under the moonlight. The village slept peacefully, unaware that ancient forces had begun to stir. At the riverbank, Zinariya knelt and dipped her hand in the water. Instantly, the current shimmered like silver ribbon, and a gentle song filled the air. Hollow, otherworldly, beautiful. "The river will protect us," she said. "But we must prepare. Not all blessings come without envy." The next day, a strange man arrived in Iwo. He wore no shoes, carried a carved walking stick, and had a gourd of dust tied to his waist. His hair was gray, and his eyes flickered like candlelight. "I am Olasoji," he said to the gathered villagers. "And I bring greetings from Chief Ogundil." Everyone stiffened. Olasoji continued. his voice sly and slippery. Our Kabiyesi humbly invites Bayo and his wife to visit Okenla. He wishes to learn about your great blessings, and perhaps share in them. Bayo was no fool. He saw the trick under the smile. But he stood tall. If your chief wishes to visit us, Bayo said, he is welcome to share our table. But the river's gift is not for sale or trade. Olasoji's eyes flashed. Very well, he said, turning away. But before he left, he whispered into Zinariya's ear, even the brightest river can be muddied. That night the wind shifted. Leaves danced wildly on trees, and strange laughter echoed from the hills. Zinariya sat outside the hut, her silver bowl glowing under the stars. The time is coming, Bayo, she said. Okenla will try to take what is not theirs. Bayo frowned. Let them try. This village is strong. Zinariya shook her head. Strength without wisdom is like a canoe without a paddle. We must do more than fight. We must teach. The next morning Zinariya and Bayo announced something new. A river festival. Let every village be welcome, Zinariya said to the elders. Let us show them what generosity looks like. Preparations began. Banners were hung. Drummers practiced day and night. Children painted their faces and practiced dances. Even the shyest women began preparing palm oil stews, roasted plantains, and banana fritters. And from the hills of Okenla, Chief Ogundil watched with narrowed eyes. They think they can outshine me with dances and cassava, he muttered. We'll see. He turned to Olasoji. Prepare the spirits. But far from war or revenge, Zinariya was preparing something else entirely. That night, she took Bayo to a hidden pool behind the waterfall. It sparkled like stars had fallen into it. Here, she said, is where our future begins. She took his hand and guided him into the water. Around them the air shimmered, and for a moment Bayo saw visions. 3 sons with faces like his and eyes like the river. One played the drum, one danced like the wind, and one held a book that glowed. Our sons, she whispered. But only if peace wins over pride. Bayo held her close. Then we will choose peace. We'll show them there's more power in sharing than in fighting. And in the distance the drums of Okenla beat louder. But for the first time Bayo was not afraid. The river festival began with sunrise drums. From every corner of the region people arrived, some by canoe, others on foot or horseback. Villagers wore their brightest clothes. Masks of antelopes, birds, and spirits filled the square. The air was heavy with roasted yams, fried plantain, and the smell of joy. At the heart of it all stood Zinariya, dressed in shimmering blue that danced like water under the sun. Beside her stood Bayo, holding her hand with the confidence of a man who had grown into more than a fisherman. He was now a leader, a storyteller, a husband to a mystery. Children laughed. Dancers twirled. Drummers told tales with their fingers. Even Mama Olyamide, the old seer, was seen tapping her foot. And just before noon the crowd parted. Chief Ogundil of Okenla had arrived. He wore red coral beads that clacked with every step. His guards carried staffs shaped like lightning bolts. Behind him, Olasoji grinned like a lizard who'd eaten too many eggs. But Bayo stepped forward with open arms. Welcome, Kabiyesi. We are honored. Ogundil nodded stiffly. I came to see this so-called miracle. Show me your river queen. Zinariya stepped forward and curtsied low. Kabiyesi, I welcome you with water and with wonder. Ogundil squinted. You speak well. But is it true? Did the river give you to this boy? Zinariya smiled. Not just to him. To all who understand that blessings are not owned. They're shared. And with that, she raised her silver bowl high, and poured water into a dry pot near the fire. As the water touched the clay, it glowed. From the pot sprang green shoots, crawling vines with golden fruit, dancing flowers that opened like smiles. The crowd gasped. Even Ogundil's guards stepped back. But the chief, he only laughed. A deep, belly-rumbling laugh. You've got magic, girl. Real magic. And instead of hiding it in palaces, you host a party. Zinariya nodded. Magic kept for one man fades. Magic shared becomes legacy. Gundil paused. Then slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out a carved flute, the royal flute of Oknla, said to be hundreds of years old. I haven't played this in decades, he muttered. Then, without warning, he lifted it to his lips and played. The tune was wild and ancient, calling the birds, shaking the dust, waking the very bones of the village. Drums followed. Dancers twirled again. Even Mama Alyamide danced, and her knees hadn't bent since the last eclipse. Bayo laughed so hard he nearly dropped his calabash. Zinariya swayed like a river spirit in the wind. The festival lasted 3 days. Gifts flowed like wine. Chiefs from distant places pledged friendship. Oknla and Iwo became sister villages. And Zinariya whispered new wisdom into every ear, teaching them how to honor nature, speak to water, and walk humbly in a world of wonders. Years passed. Bayo and Zinariya had 3 sons, just as the vision had shown. One became a drummer whose beats were said to bring rain. The second became a dancer, who could charm even wild animals. And the third? He became a storyteller, spreading tales of the River Bride, the festival of peace, and the village that chose to share rather than conquer. And that third son, he wrote this very story. And if you ever visit the river near Iwo, you might still see a woman with eyes like moonlight and feet that never touch the ground. She might not speak, but she'll smile. Because even now, long after the drums have quieted, her story flows on. Like the river that gave her. Like the love that changed everything.